feel fat today, and now you feel fat today also. You're welcome. And now there's a podcast.
Welcome to I Feel Fat Today, the show where we dispel diet myths, see what's new in diet culture, and investigate your relationship with food. I'm your host, Kelly Taylor, and you are listening to the 100th episode of I Feel Fat Today. Let's go. I'm in a new office chair. As you can see, we have a change in set design. I just couldn't do the old chair anymore, so I bought this chair and went with the biggest, most comfortable chair I could find. Because I sit many hours in this very desk, just podcasting away. No, not just podcasting, but still many hours right in this spot. And the old chair was just untenable. It was so uncomfortable. So I got this one, put it together, loved it. And then I realized, oh no, now when I podcast, I'm going to be in this like big executive looking office chair. So we're going to have to get used to it. But here I am. Now I can lean back a little bit. It also has a little footrest I can pull out if I want to. It can really help me get into the topics that we're discussing on the podcast. Anyways, for the 100th episode, you are in for such a treat. It is a solo episode, dear listeners. Thank you so much. Yes, just going to be you and I getting reacquainted. I know that the last few months, really, of episodes, I haven't been doing any kind of intro. It just kind of goes right into the interview, and that was something I've talked about this a little bit before, but that was something I kind of had to just acquiesce to because of my own personal schedule. And I know being busy is good, but I always liked filming a little intro with like a topic or even just to say hey. And so now that doesn't happen every now and again, I really cherish the solo episodes. But anyways, okay, so for today, we are unpacking the Netflix docuseries Fit for TV, the reality of The Biggest Loser. But first, as always, please subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Apple Podcasts, and leave a 5-star review. Follow us on Instagram at I Feel Fat Today. You can follow me, your host, Kelly Taylor, at Hello, This is Kelly. And send us an email at ifeelfattoday@gmail.com. And please come back every week for a new episode where we interview your favorite comedians about their relationship with self and body. Okay, now that the admin work is out of the way, unpacking the Netflix docuseries Fit for TV, the reality of The Biggest Loser. Now, I went through and I watched this docuseries twice over to make sure I didn't miss anything. I took extensive notes. I've done a little bit of research, quite a bit of research and prep, really, getting ready for this episode. I'm hoping to not be all over the place. The goal is to unpack the docuseries, the documentary on this show, and I watched it so you didn't have to, kind of thing. And the thing about the reason why I wanted to do this, it just kind of so happened to be for the 100th episode. But if you are anybody like me and have been haunted by, the curse of existing in a body, and have had, a lifelong relationship with dieting and wanting your body to look different, when The Biggest Loser came out, that was like, oh man, this show was made for me and I will do anything to get on this show. And of course I'm saying that as like probably a 12-year-old, maybe even younger, watching that show. And so let's get into it. Let's do it. Okay, so the documentary starts where you kind of see the it's a voiceover of presumably a former contestant talking about The Biggest Loser, their time on the show, and then it cuts to them now, and it looks like they haven't lost any weight ever all these years later. And so basically that gets talked about. That's a major theme of just contestants going on the show, and then ultimately gaining the weight back. So that comes up. I have a sort of like an outline that I've created here that I'm hoping to stick to, but let's get into it. Okay, I've said that enough. Okay, so contestant backstories and sort of the casting process. So through all the stories that you hear of on this Biggest Loser docuseries, there is this like thread of vulnerability, right? So many contestants like Danny Cahill from season 8 and Ryan Benson from season 1, they actually both were winners of their respective seasons, were cast with because they, in their casting tapes, talked about their deep struggles with weight and dieting. And so Danny Cahill, the season 8 winner, talks about how starting from even the 3rd grade, he was teased about his weight and called his struggle with his weight and losing any kind of weight as a monkey on his back, which I can completely relate to. I'm sure many can relate to. And so he said that monkey on his back had been there for the entirety of his life, essentially. While on the show, Danny Cahill lost 240 pounds. That's a whole overweight person, really. Lost 240 pounds on The Biggest Loser and subsequently ended up gaining it all back over time, of course. But something that Danny did note in his sort of interview process was over the years, he feels like he has probably gained and lost like 1,000 pounds, which is very, very possible if you really tally up all of the pounds gained and lost on that roller coaster over time for Danny. Then we also have Ryan Benson, season 1 winner. And Ryan, the thing that stuck out to me about his story is that he filmed his submission for the show by eating in his car and called the food his drug. We get introduced to sort of these two characters in the show, and then it goes into the show's origin. So one of the executive producers is David Broom, and he was going to the gym, and on the gym bulletin board, he saw a flyer of a obese person saying, begging someone to help them save their life. It was like a flyer of somebody saying that they were going to die and they needed to hire somebody to please personal train them so that they could lose this weight because they were afraid they were going to die. And that really struck David Broom, and it just gave him, it was the impetus for this idea of the show, The Biggest Loser, where contestants from all over the world come on and compete week after week after week in weight loss challenges or physical challenges, with the sort of metric for success being the amount of weight they would drop every week. And in terms of who lost the least amount each week would then be sort of a subject or in fear. What's the word I'm looking for? If whoever had the lowest body fat percentage weight loss, maybe not body fat percentage, but like they would do it where based on like your current weight and the amount of weight you lost, that percentage of weight that you've lost, the more weight you lost, the safer you were. And the two people that were, lost the least amount of weight essentially were then, at risk. That's what I'm looking for. At risk of being sent home. So yeah, that's the premise of the show. Now, contestants shared these deeply personal stories, and the show amplified their vulnerabilities for a dramatic effect. And so early on, the contestants were faced with things like temptation challenges, and they were designed to test the contestants' willpower, right? With like food temptations, like where they'd walk into a room and there'd be these huge daises of treats that the contestants would be faced with, of like, are you gonna have this cupcake or are you not? And they would sweeten the deals by being like, you can get a 5-minute phone call to your family. So kind of psychological torture when you think about it. But so they would have these temptation challenges, and then on top of that, production also amplified gags like camera shakings, like the camera shaking when a contestant fell off of the treadmill, or they would have sort of these like staged mishaps where the two trainers, Bob Harper and Jillian Michaels, there was one week where the contestants were left to fend for themselves, and so there were these two contestants who they were told to go on the parallel bars and do exercises on there. And these two women had never done the parallel bars. And so it really was just these sort of produced situations that made the fat contestants the butt of these jokes. So they weren't just competitions. There were engineered moments sort of stress and humiliation for these contestants. And it's almost like it was overt and subtle at the same time. And at the end of the day, I think very mean. But because there were these moments in the show that seemed inspiring, and you did see people overcome physical and mental challenges, it felt like, oh, these contestants, even though, production can be mocking them at times for our viewing pleasure, they're still getting so much out of this experience. So at the end of the day, it nets out good. That's sort of my feelings of The Biggest Loser. Not only back when I watched it when I was young, but also, going through and watching this documentary and reading up on it. So that's sort of like to kick us off. We are introduced to a few contestants or former contestants of the show. We learned about the background of like the show's impetus, and then, kind of just the idea of the show and some of the TV magic gags that made the show entertaining. So my next section that I want to go into is this woman, Tracy, was a contestant on season 8. I believe her last name is Ehrlich. I might be getting that wrong. But this Tracy talks about her time on the show and how it actually resulted in a near-death moment. So for Tracy, she talks about what I liked about what the documentary did in terms of following Tracy's story was you really got the full effect of, what her life was like before the show, the sort of emotional turmoil of right before being on the show, what she went through on it, and then sort of what the after of the production was like for her. And so she talks about how the night before leaving to go on The Biggest Loser, she was just standing in front of her fridge binging because she was so nervous. And I think that alone is something that just really illustrates how emotional eating is and how someone could get to a place in their life where they feel the desire, like people wanted to go on The Biggest Loser, like how people want to win the Powerball right now. It really, people in the documentary even said how it felt like winning the lottery, getting selected to go on this show, and how it was just a miracle. And so, but what's interesting is I feel like maybe it was mentioned when the show was actually airing, but I would have loved to have heard about Tracy binging her fridge, being so nervous before coming out to do the show, in like sort of a peel back the curtain kind of moment, which at that time of reality television, there wasn't any peeling back of the curtain. I think that things were like hyper produced in that sort of when reality television was finding its stride, especially competition reality, because it's so intrinsically linked, the emotional side of life, and it pouring into how it manifests physically. And for many of us, it manifests in binge eating. And so anyway, so she talks about how Tracy talks about how they get flown out to California and they're kind of sequestered into hotel rooms as they're getting ready to get the production really going. And while in the hotel rooms, they're all given a contract for the show. And Tracy says that she was reading through this and realized it was like way above her, comprehension really, and asked for an attorney. She knew she wasn't qualified to read through the contract, and the show said that they could get one for her, but there's also 10 other people waiting to get on the show, and so we can get you a contract, or we could just have someone else waiting in the wings to come and take your place. Or you could just sign it and get on with this show that, again, feels like the lottery being selected to go on, which, they made the documentary she made a point to sort of tell that story when she's being interviewed in this docuseries. So really painting the picture of like, yes, you can argue the show is voluntary, it's not a mandatory show to go on to. But when you think about the emotional place that people are in to go on to a show like The Biggest Loser, and then them, yes, they sign a contract, but in a sense they kind of sign their life away. And Tracy also talks about how like she thought the show would make her a better wife, a better mother, a better friend, because she was going to go onto a show where she could lose all this weight. And it's just a stubborn reminder of how different people's relationship to losing weight was before the Ozempic era, which we will get to. So the start of season 8 is a beach mile, and basically the show starts out with saying you have to race a mile and you have to cross the finish line in order to get on the show. So these contestants are on the production starts, filming starts. There are contestants on the show, and the hosts, Allison, tells them you have to run this mile across the finish line for you to be on the show. If you don't run this race, if you don't run this mile, you're out. So Tracy starts off by running really fast. She doesn't pace herself at all, and her legs give out and she collapses after almost to the end of the finish line. And the other contestants had to carry her across the finish line, and she crosses the finish line, and she's like passing out on the beach, and clearly is in and out of consciousness. And this is all on the show. And she ends up having to be medevaced out from the beach to a hospital. And in her retelling this moment that she experienced at the start of the show for this docuseries, she talks about how she saw her grandpa, who had passed, and saw a light, and claims to know that she died that day on the beach because her organs were shutting down. So she had a condition called rhabdomyolysis. And rhabdomyolysis is the rapid breakdown of muscle tissues, damaging muscle proteins, and rhabdomyolysis causes damaging muscle proteins and electrolytes to leak into the bloodstream. So in her going from 0 to 60, no movement really, just sort of being a mom and taking care of kids and probably living an very sedentary lifestyle. She goes to 0 to 100 running on this beach, gets this condition called rhabdomyolysis, where her muscle proteins and electrolytes are leaking into her bloodstream. And it can have such severe health issues, most notably causing kidney injury and kidney failure. Basically, what happened is your organs start to shut down because of this happening rather quickly. And the last thing to shut down is the heart. And that's what was happening to Tracy. So she was very sick. And had she not been medevaced out of from that beach, she probably would not be with us here today. And she was very sick in the hospital, very, very sick. So the show, kind of goes on to film without her. They weren't exactly clear on timeline, or maybe they did mention how long she was in the hospital, but I couldn't, I don't recall. But she, was telling us, explaining a little bit or recounting a little bit of what it was like being in this hospital. And she said at one point the doctor said that they're going to have to cut her legs open to drain them because I guess she was retaining water or blood. I have no idea. But she was really messed up from this as a result of doing this challenge on The Biggest Loser. So that goes into Tracy's story, which we'll circle back to. Next, I want to talk about is the contestants on the show talked about the exercise, calorie restriction, and the production stunts, right? So contestants endured ridiculously intense workouts, often burning 3,000 plus calories a day, so much, like marathon Navy level exertion for people that previously were sedentary. And you notice a trend in what the contestants talk about from their experience being on the show, not only while they were on the show, but following, is the extremely unhealthy habits they were forming, which is so ironic when The Biggest Loser is a show that is all about, these contestants now having a healthy lifestyle. So Ryan, the season 1 winner, talks about how 10 days before the final weigh-in, which the final weigh-in was always like a live event, he did a master cleanse 10 days before the final weigh-in. So not just proper eating sustainably, eating right, and exercising so that it was like less calories in, more calories out kind of thing. He did a straight up master cleanse. And at the time of his final weigh-in, when he was getting his medicals done, because of course these people are being supervised by medical professionals throughout this whole thing, he was showing signs of blood in his urine, which is signs of extreme dehydration. And if you are dehydrated, that could get to the point of causing serious risk or death. So I have my strawberry rose recess soda. I've had about 5 cups of coffee today, so I need this to help me come down. And then Danny also talks about how the extreme weight loss that he experienced on the show week over week caused him to develop sort of like exercise bulimia. So the first week of him being on the show, Danny in season 8 lost 24 pounds. The second week he lost 12 pounds. And of course, everyone's amazed. When you have the trainers there, you have your teammates there, you get up on this big stage and people, clap or awe depending on how much weight you did or didn't lose. And so, first week, 24 pounds, second week lost 12 pounds. And then the third week only lost 4 pounds, which in a normal outside of The Biggest Loser sort of scenario, if you're doing weekly weigh-ins and you're losing 4 pounds, that is like a reason to celebrate and feel really good if you're on a weight loss journey. But on The Biggest Loser, no, that's not a good thing, because only losing 4 pounds could put you at risk of potentially being voted off from by your other contestants and going home. And so he said after that, he went to eating only 800 calories a day while burning that 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day in those workouts. And that brought back the high numbers week over week of weight loss, which is what he wanted. And after that third week of only having lost 4 pounds, it was double digits every single week. And he ended up being the winner after losing 240 pounds. So real just, binging of exercise. You go from one extreme to the other. And so contestants talk about the physical toll of like fainting, vomiting, dehydration, being pushed to the edge. And something I mentioned at the top of this episode was the temptations. So, food placed in plain sight with prizes to tempt the contestants. I'm going to insert a video right here. And camera effects, like in physical stunts to accentuate falls, missteps, and mistakes. These engineered moments added psychological pressure, making the contestants feel scrutinized and humiliated while also entertaining the audience sort of after the fact, right? Like after you're a contestant on the show, you can have a memory, like you can be a contestant on the show and fall off the treadmill and, maybe even be embarrassed in the moment or, relieved that you're not hurt. And then you go home and watch the show live when everyone else is watching across America and see that, fall from the treadmill happen with the added production of like the camera shaking. And I mean, these contestants felt deep shame about gags like that, and had a real effect on their mental. So, kind of the combination of extreme exercise, calorie restriction, and production stunts highlights the blurred lines between, a health-focused competition reality television show and the reality television spectacle. And when asked about this, the producers, which was J.D. Roth, I believe was the name, I'll correct that if it's wrong, and David Bloom said our job is to make an entertaining reality television show, but they still really maintain the fact that they feel like they did good work. And in terms of having fat people lose a ton of weight, if that's the only definition of good work, then yes, they did, because that did happen. But I think, this documentary sort of investigates the other part that isn't in that statement of the mental effects, the psychological, the emotional, looking into the contestants gaining all the weight back years later, that sort of thing. Okay. So next sort of character within the Biggest Loser sphere was Dr. Robert Huizinga. So he was a former NFL doctor. He actually was a medical professional that testified in the O.J. Simpson trial. So he's a bit of a personality. A TV doctor, if you will. So he served as the chief medical advisor throughout the show's run. He was the main doctor. He oversaw the contestants' medical screenings, supervised weight loss progress, and was often shown reviewing results on camera with the contestants as part of the show. He also advocated that the contestants were closely monitored medically, and claimed the show helped many improve. He claims that the show helped improve health markers like blood sugar and blood pressure, which again is true. Now he advocated, he was definitely there as a check and balance sort of part of the production. So he advocated for safer pacing, nutrition, and aftercare. And it's clear that production took that into account, but still prioritized the drama, right? Without someone like a Dr. Huizinga on the show. Like if The Biggest Loser didn't exist in the world of like NBC television production where there's like insurance and contracts to worry about, if The Biggest Loser existed on like David Dobrik or Mr. Beast's YouTube channel, people probably would have died because of how really unsafe it is for someone to go from a sedentary lifestyle to this like crazy aggressive exercise. So of course you have to have like a Dr. Huizenga at the helm of everything. And even then, production, Robert Huizenga feels, and he could just be saying this for legal purposes, but feels like he was kind of being pushed out and on the fringes a little bit, because there are certain physical challenges that the contestants had to go through that he wouldn't have approved of if he had known that was going to happen. There's a little bit of a push and pull between what Dr. Huizenga says and what production says, kind of opposite stories of he knew exactly what we were doing and him saying they never told me everything. Something it's also important to note, when I say that there were physical challenges, there would be like rewards, like, a 5-point advantage for your team at the next weigh-in. Like there were these incentives for participating in these physical challenges. And of course it was also a form of exercise. Okay, so in talking about Dr. Huizenga, I have to go back to talking about Tracy's story. Remember Tracy? Tracy collapsed and died on the beach. He was there when she was recovering in the hospital, and he warned her, to not do the show anymore, and she returned to the show anyways, actually. So Dr. Huizenga, knew she was sick and told her that she needs to go home. But, Tracy wanted to stay because, again, I imagine myself in Tracy's situation where she talks about how she, didn't want to go back to the life that she had, the life that she had left probably just a week ago. Where she was in an unhappy marriage. She didn't feel like she was being the best mom she could be because her weight was so limiting. And she couldn't go back there. So she told Dr. Huizenga that she wanted to return. Tracy talks about how there was infidelity in her marriage, and she felt like it was her fault because she was fat. So there was so much shame and blame associated with her body. She was disrespected by her husband, and he sounds like she was dating a real jerk, a very controlling jerk. And as she was talking, I thought, this girl doesn't need The Biggest Loser. This girl needs a divorce. But alas, she told Dr. H that she was staying on the show, and Dr. Huizenga got emotional at this part of the documentary talking about this. And Tracy said that Dr. H was supportive of her returning, which I don't know. I think that if it was an untelevised weight loss retreat, I don't think a doctor would allow her to go back on the show. But there's also the added drama of like, this fat woman can do this, So he did let her return, and it was this real like, oh my God, she did it moment on the show. But he gave us strict rules of you are not to work out with the trainers, Bob and Jillian. She needed to get blood tests every 3 days. But she was determined to figure out how to stay there. And so she because she, due to this like health episode, couldn't go full tilt training with Bob and Jillian and burning all those calories and pushing herself to that extreme place. The aspect of staying on the show, because it's a reality television game show, you can really see at play with someone like Tracy in her position. So she like played the game and knew that this was all about filming a show. So like in a competition, there would be challenges posed of like, come forward, someone come forward and you'll get, a 5-pound advantage, or come forward and the other team will have a 5-pound disadvantage, that kind of things. And because it's such an emotional thing what these people are going through, where they're all in the same boat. They all have these issues with weight and food. There was a lot of kumbaya happening amongst all the people across even across teams, where it was almost unspoken that you wouldn't do that kind of stuff with the challenges. But because Tracy was in this place of like, I can't work out like these people, I'm going to jump on those things. She really alienated herself from the other contestants on the show. And it even manifested in the trainers not liking her. So when Tracy eventually did go to a weigh-in, she lost 11 pounds, which is if any other contestant had lost 11 pounds on the show, everybody would clap and be like, oh, wow. Nobody clapped when Tracy lost 11 pounds. So that's also a strange mind F, right? Because the show is about losing weight. Everyone is celebrated for losing weight. But because people didn't like the way that Tracy moved and she was like a villain or an outsider, no one clapped for her, which I'm sure at the time kind of just everyone felt very like correct in feeling this way, and probably valid in feeling upset and annoyed at Tracy. But when you think about the whole concept of the show, it really is fucked up to do that to somebody, to not clap when they lose weight or whatever. So it really brings up this question of like ethical crossroads, right? Like how much medical oversight can matter when how much does the medical overseeing of things matter when producers can override it and obscure it and paint characters or contestants on the show as the villains. And so Dr. Robert Huizenga said that he often wanted to be more involved in the day-to-day medical oversight, but producers didn't allow it at times. And from his perspective, the show highlighted weight, weigh-ins, drama, and emotional story arcs rather than the medical aspect he considered important, things like blood work, long-term health improvement, safer weight loss methods. And you got that feeling from his interviews. He didn't hold back in that regard. His medical recommendations weren't always prioritized by production, according to him, especially when it conflicted for production's need for good TV. He sometimes advised safer pacing or higher calorie intake, but producers favored the extreme transformations that made the show so dramatic. And he also pushed for aftercare programs for contestants once the camera stopped rolling, but NBC and producers weren't interested in funding that side of the show, which I feel like if The Biggest Loser took place nowadays, which they couldn't because of Ozempic, but if they did, the aftercare part of the show would be a whole offshoot of a show that you could have. And I think that that's something that as Americans, or the world, because it was a global brand, after a few seasons, became a $1 billion show. That is something that people would want to see, because so many people struggle with weight loss, and you can see people working out in these extreme measures, but like, how do you maintain, how do you sustain this lifestyle when they seem to be losing weight in such an unsustainable way? So that was a major oversight by production. And so he defended the medical monitoring that did take place, but he acknowledges that the producers didn't showcase, his role fully, and in some cases didn't follow his suggestions as much as he would have liked. But like I said, you can see the push and pull between Dr. H and production, because it did also come up in the documentary, the use of supplements like caffeine pills. Caffeine came up a lot on this show. So Dr. H says that he banned coffee and caffeine, and everyone apparently signed off on that. But contestants say that they were offered or instructed to take something called stackers, which were a kind of caffeine pill that apparently the show approved. So total gray area there. And excuse me one second. Oh wow, I'm at 40 minutes already. I gotta go a bit faster. Something that came up sort of after the documentary was released was Jillian Michaels is saying, because Jillian Michaels was one of the trainers that didn't have any participation in the docuseries, and she was saying that what Dr. H is saying is a total lie. That caffeine was a totally fine thing to use to have the contestants take, and it wasn't banned. But and the docuseries goes into this, but caffeine is a drug. Like for myself, I mentioned before, I had legitimately like 5 cups of caffeine today, minimum. Because I had a lot to do. I have a lot to do. So it's like, I got to get through it. And the only way to get through it is with the sweet, sweet drug of caffeine. And, anytime I want to have like a really good workout, or if it's going to be like a special workout where I want to do really well, like, yeah, I'm chugging a Celsius, and that caffeine really gives you like the oomph and the push to keep going, that you wouldn't have sober. Okay. Okay, so something I wanted to touch on that the show didn't spend a ton of time on, if I'm being honest, was sort of the weight regain and the supposed but not verified metabolic damage that the contestants suffered from. So contestants almost always gain the weight back, often ending up heavier down the road. They didn't give an exact number of the 200 contestants that went on the show, 75% of them gained the weight back. They didn't give us those kind of numbers. They just said that almost all of the contestants almost always gain the weight back. So Dr. Jen Kearns was actually a contestant on the show and then ended up getting hired by the show to work alongside Dr. Huizinga, explains that the science behind why contestants almost always regain the weight after the show. She described that extreme calorie restriction and over-exercise causes the body to fight back, right? So metabolism slows dramatically. The body burns fewer calories at rest. Hunger hormone spikes, so making contestants ravenously hungry years down the road. And these biological changes can last long after the show ends, making sustainable weight maintenance really hard to do, in some cases nearly impossible. And so her testimony of this underscores the show set people up for failure through no fault of their own, but really just biology. This is just the effects of, A plus B equals C, the effects of extreme exercise and extreme calorie restriction equals the body having a harder time with like your weight, your metabolic resting weight, and your ability to control your hunger. And there was a study from 2016. Oh, hello, my kitty. You want to come up here? Oh, you poor thing. There was a study from 2016 that tried to prove that there was metabolic damage done because of the extreme weight loss, but it really wasn't verified. There wasn't an NIH-backed study that demonstrated the contestants experienced persistent metabolic damage. So participants lost an average of 128 pounds. Hi, kitty. Oh, Finn again. Finn, be nice. Stop. Let's see, that is at about 44 minutes in. You want to sit on my lap? Okay. All right. Here we go. Babassus has joined the recording. You'll notice that he looks a little rough, but he's okay. It just looks bad. I keep trying to keep my baby boy cleaned up, but his mouth, he has a bit of a mouth issue going on. not at all affecting this kid he's eating, I'll tell you that. But he decided to join me, and he never joins me at my desk, so he's here for some of the pod. Okay, what was I saying? So the NIH backed study says participants lost an average of 128 pounds during the show, but 6 years later had regained most of it. And their resting metabolic rate, RMR, remained significantly below normal by about 500 to 700 calories a day, despite weight regain. And so, I mean, it can be theorized that the show messed up these people's metabolic rates. But you do have to take into effect, and this is why it really wasn't verified as far as if the show really did hurt the contestants long term physically, is the fact that these people, you know, as they talk about in the documentary, how as the show went on, the stakes got higher, like the workouts got more intense and the weights got higher. So you had 400-pound people, 500. I don't know if it got up to 500 pounds, or definitely not 600 pounds, but like 500-pound people off doing this show. It's like there was probably a lot of metabolic damage done before Biggest Loser. So how do you really prove that? But I think when you look at someone like Danny's story, you know, he lost the 140 pounds and then regained back to 340. So his highest weight as of, you know, filming this show was 340 pounds, which he gained back in the 9 years since he had been off the show. So he talked about how also because they were losing the weight so rapidly, they would wear shirts and compression wear. And so you'll notice that in the first few weeks of filming the show at the weigh-ins, they have the men completely, you know, topless, and the women weigh in just in their sports bra. And but then at a certain point, once they really start trimming down and losing weight, they start to weigh in with their shirts on, and it's because of the sagging skin. Not something that was ever talked about, if I can recall, from watching the show season after season after season. I didn't end up watching every single season. I think there was something like 12 seasons, because once I went to college, I stopped watching a lot of the competition reality television shows, like, you know, Survivor and The Apprentice and The Biggest Loser. But are you drooling? I don't want you to be drooling. Yes, you're such a handsome boy. So that's the other part of the extreme weight losses, the crazy loose skin that they end up getting also. So in talking about aftercare, the documentary exposed that there's no long-term support available. And when talking to one of the producers about it, Broom said that budget constraints prevented it, aka they didn't want to pay for it. Even, you know, the production even said that, like, this was a television show. We had the money to make a television show. It was a television show that turned into a $1 billion show. So could they have found the funds? Yes, they absolutely could have. They chose not to, but they can still use the excuse that, like, we were a television production. We don't need to do aftercare. Which, when you look at the contestants' guilt and shame associated with the show and as a result of the show, there should have been support for these people. So many of the contestants felt abandoned and blamed themselves for things like relapsing. They would call it relapsing when they would go from having lost all this weight to gaining the weight back. The contestants talked about, the shame, the guilt and shame associated with gaining the weight back. Suzanne was a contestant. I forget on which season, but she was very vocal. Suzanne comes in, I think, in episode 3 of the 3-episode docuseries, and she is very vocally against the show. And she said that when she left the show, she got home and instantly gained 20 pounds back on instantly, because you get done and you lay in bed for a week essentially, and, you know, kind of binge your old lifestyle after having spent weeks on the Biggest Loser ranch, losing all the weight. And then immediately, once she kind of got past that first week of being home, exercising like crazy. And she said she came back with a severe eating disorder and found herself avoiding social situations because she felt like she is now forever a woman that went on the Biggest Loser. And so you're being constantly scrutinized by people forever. It's like when you walk into a room and people know you from having been on a show like The Biggest Loser, the first thing they're going to assess about you is whether you kept the weight off from being on the show or you gained any of it back. And so that is a total mind F to think about, because in a perfect world, I think people just think, oh, they go on the show, they lose all the weight, and of course, why would they gain the weight back after working so hard? Well, until you've been on that roller coaster of yo-yo dieting and self-loathing, it's going to happen. There's also the part of the show that I always thought about, and I remember talking about with my mom when we were watched together, was, these people leave the ranch and then they have to go back to work. They have to go back to caring for their family, and just how your eating alone can spiral out of control. Never mind, you no longer have hours set aside to be dedicated to working out like a Navy SEAL. So Danny Cahill, actually asked about an aftercare program, and nobody wanted to do it. Production says, I mentioned this, production says they would have loved to have had an aftercare program, but at the end of the day, they're not in the business of aftercare program, and they didn't have the money to do that. Joelle was one of the contestants on the show that was featured throughout the docuseries, and she said she tried to maintain a relationship with the producers, and said that they didn't want to. There was a producer that did straight up deny this and was like, she can reach out if she wants to. But okay, so moving on, there is one contestant that I do want to briefly mention, because this contestant ended up sort of being like the fall of this show. The contestant, I can't remember if this was season 15 or 16, but her name is Rachel Fredrickson. She was a national level swimmer, and after no longer competing on the professional level, found herself having gained a lot of weight, and joined The Biggest Loser. And she actually came to the finale so thin that Bob and Jillian were like dismayed at the amount of weight that this woman had lost. And for some reason, she was the contestant where people said she took it too far, and she didn't take the message of the show to heart. And so eventually in 2017, the show got canceled after 12 years. So it wasn't 12 seasons. The show was on for 12 years. There was too much heat on the show. And I think that part of why I think 12 years was the maximum that show could have ran if it got canceled in 2017, because now in the year 2025, like everything on the internet, the opinions on the internet is just ubiquitous as being part of a story or a show, right? Like you think about how you watch a show like Severance, and there's all these branched out thoughts and theories and lore about the show that writers aren't even conceiving, right? But that's because now we ingest entertainment and then go online and we talk about it, and there's just this global network of people that can discuss something. And I think when the show was starting out, that wasn't the case. The internet really, there were chat rooms and threads, but it wasn't in the palm of our hands. It wasn't so easily accessible, and we weren't ingesting internet opinions 24/7. So I think Ozempic aside, a show like The Biggest Loser probably couldn't be made in this day and age because of people having a discussion about it on TikTok alone. It would be, I guess in today's world, canceled. So it just, kind of in going through the trajectory of this show and talking about the ins and outs of it, I think it makes sense to talk about how the show didn't have any aftercare, and then sort of the contestant that broke the camel's back of, she lost all this weight. And interesting that people said she took the show too far when, and she didn't take the show's message to heart, which in actuality she really did, because she lost all the weight that she wanted to lose, and ultimately was the Biggest Loser. Okay, let me see how much do I have left here. Okay, we're almost done. So Bob Harper, Jillian Michaels, and the trainer culture. So when you have the two trainer archetypes, there was Jillian, who was the mean but effective trainer, and there was Bob, who was kind of like the softy but was tough but reasoned. And so if you're somebody that really responds to being ruled with an iron fist and being talked to by like a drill sergeant, Jillian was your coach, and Bob was more of like the, for today's exercise, we're going to do some yoga. Like he was that kind of coach. Still tough, but like you could probably talk to him and get more of a softer side than you did with Jillian. But something that gets highlighted in the docuseries is Joelle, one of the contestants, had this confrontation with Bob where Bob wanted, the last thing that the contestants had to do for the day was run on the treadmill for 10 seconds without like touching the handles of the treadmill. And he made the contestants do it over and over and over again, running 10 seconds on this treadmill, because Joelle would get to like 3 seconds from the 10 countdown and like finish running while touching the handles, which Bob was saying you can't do. And so the docuseries shows Bob screaming, "Shut the F up and do it, Joelle." And when asked about it in the docuseries, Bob calls it, not his proudest moment, but Bob thought she was filled with excuses, but Joelle recounts it as saying she was completely out of her body. And, Bob didn't feel like she was committing, but Joelle said it brought her back to like being at home as a kid, and, cursing her out doesn't work for her. And that's something that Bob did, and Bob was supposed to be the more chill trainer. So they really did like drill sergeant these people. And it's worth mentioning, it should be mentioned, that Joelle, as a black woman, felt that the show wanted to perpetuate her as like the angry black female, and really weren't sensitive to like that kind of stereotyping and pushing her to the limit. And she said, for the most part, I never reacted like that. I didn't get the reaction. Production didn't get the reaction out of me that they really wanted, despite pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And so Jillian's tactics as a trainer, were harsh and confrontational and pushed the boundaries of safety, allegedly. She was really like a major pusher of these caffeine pills, and she says she absolutely did not do anything wrong in that instance. But kind of just talking about the trainers that were on the show. It's worth also noting that neither Bob or Jillian had any experience at all working with obese people. All of the real personal training work that they had done in the past were like celebrity. Like Bob Harper really sort of popped off before The Biggest Loser when what's her name? Pretty Woman. Julia Roberts took one of his classes. And so, just kind of LA trainers that got brought onto a production. It's not people that had experience training obese people, which I think is another thing that wouldn't happen in this day and age. There's something that the docuseries did touch on was Bob Harper's heart attack. So in 2017, he suffered a near fatal heart attack referred to as the Widowmaker in a New York City gym, and was revived by 2 doctors that happened to also be in the gym. So if those doctors weren't there in the gym, he likely would have died, because the heart attack that he had a 6% survival rate. And so that heart attack completely changed Bob's life. He went from being this like hardcore working out trainer who seemed to be in perfect health. Had to shift to like yoga and building trust with his body, and had this sort of like vulnerable reckoning with his fitness culture that he had perpetuated. And they didn't really talk about too much the first off, the irony of Bob being this total picture of health and having a Widowmaker heart attack. You don't hear people ever surviving a Widowmaker, and if they do, they come back with like, brain damage, or God forbid, or a vegetable. Oh, so horrible. And like, when he, as a person that suffered that, has to just do such a dramatic drop off and crazy recovery. He was in a coma for a few days because of this heart attack. He stands by everything he did on the show. And it's like, well, when you think about how emotionally you had to recover from now your new relationship with exercise, like, I would think that maybe you would reflect upon the fact that, you became a millionaire from beating people into the ground with fitness. And yes, you did change many people's lives for the better, but what's the emotional implication of that? Because when I say change people's lives for the better, you maybe introduce them to exercise and cause them to lose a bunch of weight. But, when you look at the contestants that have gained a lot of the weight back, what good really happened? So then they also talk about the fallout between Jillian Michaels and Bob Harper. And he said that the one person that did not reach out to him after suffering that catastrophe of a heart attack was Jillian Michaels. So she's also, I think, off the deep end. Like, she really is a nut, allegedly. Okay, so when we look at the show's legacy and the reflection sort of culturally about The Biggest Loser, real pain is what got people on the show, right? So Olivia Ward, she was the season 11 winner. She is an opera singer, and she couldn't be hired because she was in the wrong body, and actually had like a director say to her, like, you have the talent, but not the look. And so if you lose 20 pounds, I'll hire you. And that kind of like was the thing that got her to want to do the show. And her sister was actually runner up that year. And her sister talks about how she was a collegiate athlete, but in her first year of college slipped down the stairs and basically retired her. And she gained a lot of weight after that, and saw the shift in how she was treated. And so also another emotional story that got her to join the show. And Olivia joined the show at 35 as well, and her main motivation was to have children. So a lot of like emotional pulling at the heartstrings sort of stories that these contestants have. And Aubrey Gordon, who is a fat activist and dream guest of the show, pointed out that the show wanted to do deep emotional work, but they didn't want to have the people credentialed to do that work. And the trainers are not therapists. And there would be these moments on the show where Bob and Jillian would have just kicked these contestants' butts at these workouts, you know, grueling hours, really pushing them to the limit. And then they would have this like sort of soft, sweet conversation where it was like, you know, you did that. You did that. And are you changing your life for the better? You are. Look at me. You're changing your life for the better. Yeah. You did that. That's in here. That's in here. So they would do shit like that. And it's like, you're not a medical professional. You like don't need any kind of degree to be a physical trainer, you know, to be a personal trainer. So it's botched. It's botched when you have a show that wants to do that work. And I thought that was a very apt observation and thing to point out for Aubrey Gordon to say. Now, we would be remiss to not talk about the contrast to modern wellness with medications like Ozempic. A show like The Biggest Loser flat out could not exist these days because of Ozempic. But I think also like the lack of mental health support, just sort of like the show's methodologies are relics that kind of don't exist today, which is insane because thin has never been more in. And I'm going to touch on this briefly because I want to talk about it sooner rather than later. But Serena Williams has recently become the spokesperson for weight loss medications, specifically GLP-1 treatments like Zepbound and Wegovy, through her partnership with the telehealth company Ro. And in this campaign, Serena Williams shares that her personal experience of losing 31 pounds over 8 months using the medication, which she describes as necessary to aid her body post-pregnancy. Now, the reason why I bring this up, the reason why in talking about a show like The Biggest Loser and this documentary, and why I would bring up Serena Williams is because I am dismayed by Serena Williams being a spokesperson for Ozempic, a GLP-1, Zepbound, whatever. The medication, the shot, the jab, because it has never been more clear that as a society, we are all on Ozempic for aesthetic purposes. You can tell me to the cows come home how it helps with food noise. I saw a video pop up on my TikTok today about this person posted about how they're on antipsychotic medications and how the symptoms of those antipsychotic medications that keep something like schizophrenia at bay, the physical symptoms that take a toll on their life, and how GLP-1s have helped them. I understand all of that, and I think all of that is valid, and I'm very interested to see over the years where we end up with those kinds of situations we're talking about. Serena Williams was an Olympian, a gold medalist, and she's selling Ozempic. This is not a person that is on antipsychotic meds. This is not a person that has diabetes. This is not a person that ever needed to lose any amount of weight that would warrant GLP-1. And it's one thing for her to go on it privately, and it's one thing for her to decide to go on a GLP-1 because she wanted to lose the baby weight. She's on it. Everybody's on it. Now she's the face of it. It just, as a society, it has never been more clear that thin is in. And I think what frustrates me the most about Serena Williams specifically selling Ozempic is that this was an Olympic level athlete that, yes, in your retirement, you don't have, she's not going to have the same body she had at the, Rio Olympics or whenever she competed. But you can't tell me that as a mom in her post pregnancy, she doesn't still have a workout routine. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like these weight loss drugs are going or pushing her body past where her body wants to naturally be, which when it comes to body neutrality, body positivity, whatever, that was, I think, one of the core messages of a movement like body neutrality, of just let your body exist where it wants to be naturally. And so we could never have The Biggest Loser now. And it's also worth mentioning that, of course, Serena Williams says that this decision is, health driven, but it's very interesting and comes upon a lot of criticism that, yes, not only does this perpetuate harmful, body standards and the fact that, it's not approved for aesthetic use, but her husband is an investor and board member of Roe. Alexis Ohanian, I think his name is. And so it's like, okay, that's how Serena got that gig, is because her husband's a board member of Roe. And it just has dirty money written all over it. So, yeah. Closing thoughts, what does Fit for TV teach about our complicity as viewers in society's narrow definition of healthy? I think that The Biggest Loser was the personification of sort of society's narrow-minded view of what is healthy. There was a lot of things happening in the behind the curtain for this show that weren't healthy. And I think the contestants that went on the show lost any amount of weight, especially a large amount of weight, and then ended up gaining the weight back, were really just seen as like the laziest of fucks, which is not fair. And I remember feeling that way as well, of like, oh man, they couldn't keep it off, as I'm eating my bowl of ice cream on the couch watching this. I'm like, they just couldn't keep it off. I'm gonna go get more chips. Like, we just love being able to judge other people by seeing their failures, and I think that The Biggest Loser gave us that ability. But I mean, if you know somebody that auditioned for The Biggest Loser, or was on The Biggest Loser, or maybe you're just a super fan of The Biggest Loser, please reach out to me. Email us at ifeelfattoday@gmail.com. I would love to interview you. And yeah, so please, that's what I got, guys. This is our 100th episode. Man, I am so happy. I'm so proud. And I really want to thank my 10 listeners for you being so loyal throughout the 2 years of doing this show, and share your thoughts on social media, man. Comment on our Instagram your thoughts about it. Hit up my threads. Hello, this is Kelly. I think that's my handle on there. I'd love to hear your take on the documentary, what you thought about it. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, even if you didn't enjoy the episode, hit subscribe, man. Subscribing is free. Subscribe to us on YouTube so you don't miss future breakdowns of other documentaries and stories about weight loss. If you have other recommendations on documentaries I should watch, or movies about weight loss I should watch that you want me to talk about on the show, I'd be more than happy to. I love giving my opinion. yeah, if you know someone that was like a super fan or a fan at all of The Biggest Loser, tag them in this episode. I love to hear their perspective and what they thought about my breakdown of the docuseries and the breakdown of the show. And of course, leave a review, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and give us a follow. Yeah. And this has been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to go for 100 more. All right. Until next week, we'll talk to you. Bye. Oh, my kitty.